Stop pretending the anti-Sharia movement has anything to do with empowering women. Muslim women are sure they don't need saving. Oh, which Muslim women? Can it be the ones who are being stoned to death for being raped? You know, for honor and all that stuff. Or is it the ones who live in free Western countries where they're allowed to speak these words without fear of retribution? But wait, they claim that there is retribution for speaking these words, and you'll see later why. Act for America, a national grassroots anti-Muslim organization designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an extremist group, claims its March Against Sharia events are an effort to protect Muslim women and children from Islamic law. You see, when SPLC labels someone as an extremist group, you know that they're probably not an extremist group. And immediately you know it's a group that doesn't fit well with the leftist narrative. Notice how they use the phrase anti-Muslim also. Immediately, this phrase tugs on heartstrings of the left. It's like, oh no, they're anti-Muslim. Those poor victims, we need to protect them. They must hate Muslims, they're bigots. If it was something like anti-Christian, then oh no, all of a sudden it's, oh no, yeah, that's right, you go. Fuck those Christians. Those Christians are bigots. No, people who are anti-Christian are not bigots. The group asserts that scattered incidents of honor killings and female genital mutilation in the US are evidence that Sharia, a system of Islamic jurisprudence, is slowly creeping into American society. They're not exactly correct about this. Sharia is the only form of law allowed in Islam. Sharia by definition means the law in Arabic. And where does Sharia originate from? Well, Sharia originates from the Quran. The Quran is the holy text of Islam, as we all should know by now. It functions the same way as the Constitution does in the United States. It is the central text by which laws are derived from. Now, there are sunnahs and hadiths also. Sometimes the sunnahs and hadiths don't really matter depending on which philosophy you follow in Islamic law. But all systems, in order to be considered Sharia, has to be derived from the Quran. That is not negotiable. Because of that, Sharia cannot coexist with any other type of central text. So for example, in the United States, in order for Sharia to work, the Constitution must either integrate or be replaced by the Quran as it's the central text for the law. We must ensure that every woman and child enjoy the protection afforded by the US Constitution, the group writes on website. The organization's stated intent of protection, in quote, the country from Sharia law betrays a basic misunderstanding about what Sharia actually is, as well as the tireless work of Muslim activists to end practices like FGM in the US. Notice how the word protecting is in quotes, as if they're not actually protecting anybody. The media, and I'm using the media as a catch-all term for every type of news organization, and we will include any type of journalistic organization in there as well. They all like to do this. When there is a claim asserted by some group that does not agree with their politics, all media likes to put that claim in quotes as if that's not true, as if their claim needs to be tested more before we can accept that. This occurs both on the left and the right. It occurs everywhere. And we just went over what Sharia is. The Huffington Post includes an example of the tireless work of Muslim activists to end practices like FGM. That's probably true, and honestly is. But here's the problem. With any type of movement, there's always going to be both pro and con groups who either support or are against that cause. So there are Muslim activists who want to end practices like FGM, and more power to them, alright? Definitely support that. However, there are also Muslim activists who want to continue FGM and spread it. That's something that the media never likes to talk about. With any type of group, in this case it is Muslims, they always focus on one side of the argument, in order to try to paint it like, oh no, they're all like this. There's no other side. They're all like this. The thing is, you can't paint any type of group with such a broad brush. You don't have a wide variety of people within that group. Groups are composed of individuals and everyone thinks differently. There's going to be similarities depending on the central components of the group, the central beliefs of the group, but there's always going to be differences within the group. I think whenever the media does this, in this case, Huffington Post is talking about Muslims, it's very dishonest. Because it completely neglects the other side of the argument. It completely neglects the whole picture. And that's how narratives are formed. HuffPost reached out to prominent Muslim American women to hear their reactions to Act for America's claims of having their best interests in mind. Here we go again, prominent Muslim American women. On what basis are these Muslim American women prominent? You have to always be careful whenever such terms are thrown around, such categorizations. Other words of this nature would be like heralded, or well known, something like that. It's an effort to paint these people as authority figures for a certain group. And it's like prominent Muslim American women for who? Do they speak for all Muslim American women? No, nobody can ever speak for everybody. Not for any group. Unless they're elected somehow. Maybe in an informal election, it's sort of recognition by the group. And that's possible. In some sense, they are prominent Muslim American women. But I'm going to bet that they're going to be left-leaning. They're only prominent Muslim American women to the left. These individuals cannot speak authoritatively about my rights as a Muslim woman, said Daisy Khan, Executive Director of the Women's Islamic Initiative for Spirituality. Oh, fuck this, I'm not gonna read all of that. Acts for America claims to be committed to protecting women and children, but its tactics tend to have the opposite effect on Muslim women, said Rana Abdel Hamid. Its rhetoric and actions empower bigots who target Muslim women and put us all at risk in the face of this type of extremist violence, Abdel Hamid said. And now that's true with any cause. You see, Abdel Hamid is not wrong in that instance. There will always be groups or people who you do not intend to help in their cause, but you do so anyways, unintentionally. You're only looking at the effects from one side again. Yes, it does empower bigots. Does it also empower Muslims? Maybe you're consequentialist where the intention doesn't matter at all. Most people aren't purely consequentialist, and neither are they only focused on intention where the consequence doesn't matter. People are really in between those two. You can hear the political language here. Empower bigots, extremist violence, all those evil people. And it's funny because on the other side of the political spectrum, those two phrases also apply. When Sharia supporting activists support their cause, they also empower bigots and extremist violence. You see how that works? Which bigots? Who's committing the violence? That's what matters. Also, is it their intention to do that? Any type of movement will always have unintended effects. But is the cost worth it? Does the benefit outweigh the costs? We also want hate groups to stop using us as an excuse for their bigotry. It's funny, in politics, everyone becomes a psychoanalyst. It's like, oh no, that's not your true intention, you're hiding your true motives. And when people say that, immediately people are like, oh, maybe you're hiding your true motives, maybe you believe that because you're saying false things. It's not that simple. I think people should be taken at their word, and people often do lie, but what other choice do we really have? A good way to really deal with this, there's no perfect way to deal with this, but so a better method is to look at their allies, look at what their true intentions are. They may say one thing and really mean another thing. That does often happen. At the end of the day, you have to look at their actions. It's what they're saying and what they're actually doing matching up. You see, in this case, I think Abdel Hamid is wrong because it sounds like Act for America is not actually causing the violence themselves. Because all they're doing is speaking out against Sharia, so far according to this article. But they're not the ones attacking or being extremist. Then who are? It's the bigots and extremists who actually are doing that stuff. And it's unfair to always say, oh no, you're supporting bigots and extremists because of what you're saying. It's like, no, we actually don't like those people. That's not our intention to do that at all. And what's going on here is that the extremists and bigotry is being used as a scapegoat, an excuse to shut down Act for America's argument, Act for America's cause. And that's not fair because that same type of thinking can be used against Islam in general. Oh, look at these Islamic terrorist groups. Because of that, we need to shut down Islam completely. Now, is that fair? Well, if you have that line of thinking, then that must be the case. But I don't think Abdel Hamid would support that. My intention isn't to go through the whole article. My intention is to really point out some things, some inconsistencies, or things that bother me when the media writes about things. I don't like the narratives they push. Everyone has their own narrative. Everyone has their own perspective on how the world works. Which one is right? Well, they can't all be right because everyone's blind in some way. And I think you get the point by now that there's not only one side to the argument, there's various perspectives that you need to look at. If the public wants to help Muslim women, how about actually listening? So, by listening, you mean capitulating to everything you want us to do? There is no shortage of Muslim American women who do not need anti-Muslim zealots claiming to save us from a religion that has empowered us all to be who we are today, said Linda Sarsour, an activist and one of the organizers of the historic Women's March on Washington. Yep, her again. People, you guys should actually research about Linda Sarsour's background. It's not pretty.